headlines. But first, imports, exports, and tax reform. Joining me now from Washington is Barney Jopson, U.S. policy correspondent for the Financial Times. His piece, Trump and the Tax Plan Threatening to Split Corporate America, appeared in the FT on Monday. He's been following this tax proposal for several weeks, and the response from business, Congress, and the international community. Barney Jopson, welcome back to OnPoint.
Hi, Tom. Good to be here.
You say that this tax plan is putting a big divide, almost creating a civil war in the American corporate community. Why? What's going on, Barney?
So this is a radical proposal, one of the most radical proposals we've seen on tax reform in maybe 30 years.
Many American retailers these days, you're going to have relatively inexpensive imported clothing from all over the world. Americans, and electronics, very similarly, Americans have become accustomed, and yes, there's been a giant cost on manufacturing going abroad, but they've become accustomed to rather low cost profile for an awful lot of consumer items. What would it mean on that front, Barney?
Well, you're right. Over the last 20, 30, even 40 years, the consumer economy has been built around the imports of products from low-cost locations, whether it's China, Vietnam, or Mexico. So this plan is precisely so radical because it would upturn that trend of outsourcing that we've seen for decades. And if it did result in much less importing of products and much more U.S. production would inevitably be more expensive, and that would push up the prices for consumers. I mean, one estimate we've heard from one group of retailers is that the import tax would result in families paying $1,700 more per year on food and gasoline and electronics. So that's a big change. But one of the question marks here is whether it's really realistic to imagine that you can have a renaissance in U.S. production of many of these goods. Can we really imagine that we're going to see a surge of American T-shirt factories popping up around the country? There are a lot of economists who say it's just not realistic. The U.S. doesn't have the right skills base. It doesn't have the low-cost labor that you need to do that.
This would be a border import tax. On the way out, they'd pay very little, but on the way in, yes. Barney, what about it? Are they doing it already abroad and we just don't, or would we get into a tit-for-tat situation here?
Well, there's an argument that this tax is already done in a different way overseas via a VAT, a value-added tax. But the bigger issue is that there is a high possibility of a tit-for-tat here because a lot of other countries would dislike the penalty on the imports. They would see that as discrimination against imports, which is illegal under certain international rules. And at the Financial Times, we've already been told that in Europe, lawyers are looking at this and considering how they would mount a legal challenge against this case. So the possibility of an international legal battle over it is really there.